I appreciate our tourism community. I appreciate our hoteliers.
The following show and broadcast is a production of Better Savannah, an independent expenditure committee dedicated to better policy outcomes at the state and local level. The views, opinions, and statements made by the hosts and/or their guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Better Savannah.
About to raise some hell up in here. Money. And so, yeah, I'm going to call the police. I'm going to call everybody. And y'all can call it what y'all want to call it. I'm sorry. The only reason why I call it, it's not petty, because people complain about the store all the time.
Yes, ma'am.
They give people tainted stuff, but if they could do me like that, they do everybody like that. I'm going nowhere. I want my money. I'm about to have a community project on this corner right here. I'm about to call all my friends and do some lifestyle stuff, because that's what they do. I just want my receipts back.
Okay. Let me go find out. Hopefully they ain't playing work.
And tell them I want my food that I paid for back too. I'm up here raising hell about my money. This raggedy song stuff that they give people all the time and won't give a refund with receipts.
Just put it on the floor in there. Y'all stick around here till she leave.
John, what's up, buddy? It's another day in paradise, man. Oh, I hear you, baby girl. The dog thinks so too. I played that Linda Walter Bryant video here at the top of the show. We're going to talk about that in the back half of our episode, but quite astounding, the video that we got our hands on there. Appreciate you putting that together for this episode. But just want to welcome everybody in. So a lot of people kind of lining up in the live chat here to view our show live tonight. This is episode number 76, John. They just keep coming up. We're going to have a big slew of episodes over the next month or two. It's qualifying week in Georgia, and we've seen relatively no surprises so far on the local front. The candidates we are expecting to run seem to be running in the House District 163 race, Senate District 2, and locally here in the school board races. But obviously, John, the biggest story this week continues to be the ongoing saga in Port Wentworth, Georgia. You wanna kind of update our viewers from last week's episode as to where we are?
Well, sure. I'll give it a whirl. Everybody knows there was an election in November, on November 2nd, and the outcome of that election resulted in a new majority of progressive candidates, many of whom were African American. And this is the first time in the history of Port Wentworth since its founding as a city in 1957 that that configuration of a council uh, was manifest. And the old guard power brokers uh, were not happy and have done everything they can to thwart the seating and the functioning of this city because they're sore losers. I'm sure there's a lot more to their motivations than that, but that simply said, um, that's what it looks like. I mean, it's just ugly, ugly. Uh, Civil war mentality almost manifesting in this city in the year 2022. So that's my take on it, Chuck. It's an ugly civil war that should not have happened, and the path forward are I guess several. I don't know why Ron Stevens needs to get involved in it. I'm sure he's doesn't like being involved in it, but nonetheless, he's involved in it. So you want to tell us what Ron Stevens is thinking? This is the mayor, by the way, that you're seeing.
Gary Norton on screen for those of you who are listening to this as a podcast later on. We're just going through some of the Savannah Morning News articles. Gary Norton pictured there, the mayor of Port Wentworth. He has not attended either of the city council meetings so far this year. So him and Glenn Jones, who's known as Pig Jones, are essentially abdicating their duties and responsibilities as council people, right?
Yeah, they took an oath. They took an oath.
Correct. They took an oath to govern this city as it currently constitutes, and not to try and undermine, the charter, which I believe Gary Norton and Pig Jones had a heavy hand in rewriting several years ago, right?
Yeah.
So this article was yesterday morning at 9 a.m. Okay. There's some good quotes from sitting council members. On Monday evening or Tuesday evening, Port Wentworth had its second meeting of the year. And, basically, residents were, outraged to say the least that this just pop up. So 2 hours later, rather, here's the updated version of this story. And here's the lead from Nancy Guan at the Savannah Morning News. Lawmaker, Port Wentworth City Charter won't be pulled yet, but shot fired across the bow. And you know me, John, I'm not really bashful. I picked up the phone on Wednesday and I called Ron Stevens, right? I've been around Savannah for a decade now. A lot of people know who you and I are. They know what Better Savannah is. And I just called and I left a message. I said, hey, Sheriff Stevens, if you could just call me back, help me understand the situation, right?
Right.
So this quote, we sent a shot across the bow, was exactly what he said to me. The other quote from the other story, the city's been dysfunctional for years. It's both sides was a quote I got out of him. And God, this picture, I'll never get over that picture of Ron Stevens on the screen here. And essentially, he did agree. My reason for reaching out, John, was I said, look, you can't just blow up this city charter 90 days into a new term after a council. If there's two sides of Port Wentworth, meaning the northern, newer HOA majority, northern Port Wentworth, and the historic old downtown warehouse central kind of Port Wentworth, if those two areas would like to have an amicable split from each other, there's a way to do that, right? We could do that. It can be studied. It can be rolled out, fiscally responsible, prudent, practical, and fair. But just blowing up the charter, throwing everybody back to the county, which is going to force a 2-year wait to seek cityhood again. In the meantime, who knows what Chatham County's government will let come through in terms of development, right? In that time period, that's just an untenable situation. And so my my thing with Chairman Stevens was basically, look, if you follow through on this threat, you're going to be in a position where you're setting a precedent that is really dangerous for the rest of the state. And so I think, Ron Stevens, political goals and strategy here was exactly as he says, to send a shot across the bow and put a time limit, a hard stop time limit, and say, look, either A, you guys are going to figure this out as a city now and govern the city as it is. B, you're going to come to a decision where these two sides of Port Wentworth can go their separate ways amicably. And if those two options are not met within the next 12 months, then I firmly believe they will dissolve the charter and will throw this back to the county, which is, again, just a horrific outcome because you're talking about the fastest growing municipality in the state of Georgia right now, Port Wentworth, being put back into the unincorporated county. That growth needs more local representation to guide it through. Wouldn't that be our contention, John?
Well, it would. I want to walk back for a minute, Chuck, to some of the comments you shared that Ron Stevens mentioned. And it just doesn't ring true that Ron says, well, this city has been a contentious mess from the jump. I don't remember Ron getting involved, or
I believe Ron is from Port Wentworth.
Well, it's fine. So be it. My point is, I mean, I don't read everything, but I read a lot of stuff. And I've been here almost 30 years. I don't remember the contention or problems that Ron says, oh, it's always been dysfunctional.
Right.
Well, Ron, that sounds a little too convenient to justify your intervention right now. It just sounds too convenient to me as a justification for being the overseer at the state level, and I'm going to act now because they've just worn me out. They've tried my patience, for so many years. Well, I don't see a history of that. That sounds like a manufactured justification for threatening the city with dissolving their charter. So it was a fair election. There'll be another election. I mean, there's staggered terms out there, right?
Yes, they have staggered terms, and we don't have that in Savannah. I've always
so
liked that.
In 2 years, there's going to be another election. The mayor will be on the ballot this time, right?
Yeah, no, he was just reelected because Julius got disqualified. Remember? John, I think, I want to hope for the best that these people in downtown Port Wentworth are going to allow some breathing room for this new council. I would suggest to the newest members of council that you be open to the idea of an amicable split. These people want to get out of here. It's not like you're losing the majority of your tax base. The majority of your tax base is in the northern part of Port Wentworth. But again, it's about having a responsible, planned, amicable split, which needs to be involved by all members of the current council. So here's what I hope happens in the time limit that Ron Stevens has laid out. Okay. What I hope is that the city of Port Wentworth will put together a study committee, a commission, a blue ribbon task force, whatever you want to call it, right? Yeah. To study and agree upon an amicable plan to split the city up. If that plan is good and can gain some support via a referendum, then yeah, the citizens should participate in that. I want to address this question, and Betty Jones, I appreciate you asking it because it's definitely been on my mind a whole lot. Is that in the meantime, Mayor Gary Norton and Glenn Jones, they really don't have a choice but to start governing, right? So this is why my advice would be to the city: put together that joint commission and ask them to be involved. Let's study it as a community, see what the impacts would be and the feasibility and the plan. Because that way there's really no excuse. You still have to govern the current city you have in the interim, even if this becomes the plan for the future. But this refuse to participate because I'm in the minority.
Yeah, that's totally unacceptable.
I mean, imagine what Adam Van Brimmer would be saying about Keisha Gibson Carter and Alicia Miller Blakely if they just decided to stop showing up, right? There'd be editorials out the wazoo. So I think that if this type of commission gets put together, the ball is in Mayor Norton and Councilman Jones's court, so to speak, in that it's on them to come to the table, work on that commission, and govern in the interim. And look, if you don't have the votes, you express your dissent, D-I-S-S-E-N-T.
Sure.
Express your dissent and try to win the next election. But,
Exactly.
You can't expect the other half of this council, the other 2/3 of this council, rather, to want to look into this amicable split when you won't even come govern the meeting you're elected to govern, Mayor Norton. So I know that Ron Stevens is from Port Wentworth, John, and I'm really disappointed. I think his leadership is too brash on this issue. I really wish, maybe somebody like Dean Kicklighter, would have been given the lead on this. Somebody's a little bit more reasonable. Somebody's represented that area in the past. I just want to leave these citizens that going back to the county is not in your best interest. The county zoning going to be much more relaxed. Much more developers, skimming by, putting warehouses in every neighborhood. And look, I mean, Keyshawn, I agree. I think there's some actions from these council leaders that would warrant being removed. But given the drastic nature of the situation, if you don't at least discuss the idea of an amicable split, it's kind of playing into the hands that they're playing. They're playing a hand of, we're just going to refuse unless we get what we want. Well, this is what they want. They want an amicable path to splitting up the city into two cities. And, I think that at least is worthy of discussion. What is absolutely not worthy of discussion should be just dissolving the charter as is and throwing it back to the county. That cannot be on the table. Go ahead, John.
You got to help me understand this, and I think some of our viewers will have the same conundrum. You've had a city council of 7 members, 7th member being the mayor, who votes only to break a tie, right? A lot like Tybee, small town, although 4 times the size of Tybee, 12, 13,000 people instead of 3,000. So there's an election, and who didn't participate in the forums and the debates? The guys that are wanting to bust up the town. Okay, they checked out of the discussion phase pre-election. That they tipped their cards early by just saying, "Yeah, we're not going to get involved." Well, their lack of involvement didn't help them, and this new group of Rufus and Joe Smith, Gabrielle get elected, and the majority derivative of council becomes progressive, meaning they campaigned on not dumping warehouses in residential neighborhoods, trying to protect the residential feel, quality of life, trying to get their police department not to be seen as a speed trap, point on I-95. I mean, there was some legitimate and good concepts espoused. So anyway, so there's an election. The election, nobody says ballot stuffing. Nobody says fraudulent. Everyone, including the losing side, says this was a righteous election. Okay, I'll get to the point. So you have an election, you have the outcome, and now Ron wants to take the football and go home. I don't understand how the guy can just overlord his way into saying, "Oh, I don't like the election outcomes, so I'm going to remove your charter. I'm going to decommission your city. I'm going to make you become part of Chatham County." And I appreciate your thoughtfulness on turning into the skid as opposed to away from the skid, and working and putting together, bipartisan groups to try to work this out. That's all fine and good, and it'll probably come to that. But I want to know, why does Ron Stevens get to jump into this and say the guys that didn't participate I'm siding with the guys that didn't participate in the election process, and after the election they don't attend meetings. I'm going to side with them. Their buddies who worked at the city all resign, and I'm going to side with them. I mean, what?
Not only did they resign, John, they mismanaged everything on the way out. So this is Jenny's comment. Money. Port Wentworth sitting on like $30 million in cash, right? Because they got ARPA money, all that stuff, and basically since December, bills have not been getting paid. It's like 150, 160 grand in arrears. I'm sure their new leadership is going to dig. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I mean, it's not great either. But more importantly is that the future of this city is just in great question and doubt, and that is not good for our regional area.
Well, Chuck, they've replaced the city manager. They've replaced the city attorney. That they've held 2 consecutive meetings in a professional manner with public input and proper procedures and processes. So this thing is, it's off to a rough start because a bunch of losers refused to participate and tried to lock down City Hall. But why do we reward that sort of behavior? Why aren't we saying, hey, man, it was a democratic election, a new majority was sworn in, and now we're gonna ruin that. We're gonna take that away. I'm blown away by the overlord, heavy hand of the state legislature, specifically Ron Stevens, saying, "Oh, well, you guys are dysfunctional." And one last thing, Chuck, the reason it's convenient for Ron to do that is he got backup from the media, particularly the 3 TV.
I want to use this opportunity to just poke our old friend Adam Van Brimmer, who made fun of the fact that you put the apostrophe before the S on Norton instead of after.
Sorry.
Okay. We all didn't get a communications degree or whatever.
Did he really point that out?
Yes, he did. Fuck yeah, he did, man. All right. Andre Pilot Patterson, longtime viewer of the show.
Yeah, good lady.
Town leader, great lady. Said this deserves more attention. And Adam said, you can't be serious. Our Nancy Guan has owned this story going back more than a month. But as we just discussed, these stories are being written tilted heavily in favor of the story being sold by Gary Norton, Ron Stevens, and old downtown Port Wentworth. Where is your story, Adam? Where is your editorial calling out Ron Stevens for brashness and just ridiculous plan and trying to dissolve a charter overnight? Where's that editorial, Adam?
I tell you what, Adam,
where's your representation for all the black and brown residents of North Port Wentworth who are being immediately disenfranchised by this type of move? You're right. Now, Adam Van Brimmer came out a couple of weeks ago and called out the Republican delegation for changing the maps. It was a good editorial. Where's this one? That's what Andrea's saying. Yeah, there's no calling out of the leaders here.
I'll make a deal with Adam Van Brimmer. I will take remedial punctuation courses as soon as he adds his voice to what
this and the weeping time and a couple other issues. Yeah, I agree with you, Keyshawn. Everything is happening really fast. there does seem to have been some plan for this. I mean, to me, there's too many moving parts, too many variables having to be planned in order for this to have been pulled off. This seems to have been in the works for months, and that's not good, and that should be investigated. Where is Attorney General Chris Carr?
This is so eerily, the war between the states type context. The first time you get a black majority progressive city council in the history of Port Wentworth, you can't have your city anymore.
Does that sound familiar, people in Savannah?
I mean, that's a playbook.
Worse there.
Right after Reconstruction, when the federal troops went away, all the plantation owners rubbed their hands together and they said, we're back in business. So I just can't believe that Ron is lining up and coveting the Norton side of this equation, Chuck. It's like, it really is. It's like pre-civil rights. It's like, this is our town. It's a white town, and we're going to keep it that way. I'm sorry. That's how it looks to me. Adam Van Burmer should be writing about this. He should be calling it out for what it is. But instead, he's silent and picking on my grammar. I'm sorry about the apostrophe. Got bigger fish to fry here.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Let's move on a little bit here. You wanted to talk about this, and I know that there's a lot of stuff being kind of put together about this Eastern Wharf right now. But there's a lot kind of being talked about these apartments and townhomes and condos being so very close to historically underserved populations, homeless camps.
Let's take the walking tour.
The East End, housing project. Go ahead.
I said, let's give our viewers a walking tour of the area. It's all of less than a half square mile, and there's
pull up the map.
The whole shooting match. The story of Savannah is contained in this 1/2 square mile geographic area, and there's a lot to unpack. And I still fondly remember it as Savannah River Landing.
It's a cursed piece of property in a lot of old Savannians' minds, John. It's a very cursed piece of property going back.
Do you have my JPEG I sent you with?
No, you didn't send me that. And the map you said, but I don't have that.
Let me send it to you now. Can I do that?
Send it to me now. What are you talking about here?
Hold on. Give me just a second here.
You sent me 3 attachments earlier.
No, I sent this last week, Chuck, when we decided not to have a show.
Man. Yeah, that's a while ago. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So just for our viewers, up on the map, people who are listening on the podcast apps, this is looking at kind of the Google map view of this area, and just kind of how close it is to a couple of other key developments. And John's going to send me a little map here or something so I can put it up on the screen. Give us a little bit more background while I'm loading this up, John.
Okay, well, Savannah River Landing was a project that kind of got started in 2004 and 5. I mean, as I was leaving the county commission, they were consolidating these parcels adjacent the river between McIntosh curving off there to the left, and all of these parcels were jumbled up together, and development concept was hatched, and then the 2007 financial meltdown happened, and the project got paused.
Mm-hmm.
So, it ultimately came back with a new name, Eastern Wharf, and this is the area in question along the river. And the first thing I want people to understand is that X1, X2, and X3 are homeless tent cities, little micro communities of homeless people living under the Truman Parkway overpass and along East President Street in the shrubs and bushes. And it's pretty dense. I mean, there's hundreds. There's hundreds of people.
Not only that, right behind these two, this is a housing project on Broad Street, or not Broad Street, but yeah, Broad Street.
Are you sure that isn't the back end of the Wheaton Street DFAX building?
Maybe, but I thought that this sat there. I think there's a housing project right here.
Well, there is up at
yeah
up at East Broad, but just down on Wheaton is anyway.
So like right here, this is the housing project, John.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got hundreds of homeless people living in tents, living in lean-tos, really unfortunate and desperate situations. But I marvel at the juxtaposition of, can you show that image of the new hotel?
Yep.
What's it called? The Hamilton?
The Thompson?
The Thompson. Okay. So this bad boy on the left is now open.
It's got a great Chinese restaurant in there here.
Okay. And Jessica Lebos, evidently, I haven't read it. I'm looking forward to it. Wrote a blog post about the rooftop bar and how this has become kind of claimed by locals. The tourists haven't quite figured it out or don't know how to get there.
Yeah, so it's a little off the beaten path. It's you got to walk down the riverfront kind of to get there.
Yeah. So what is the tale of Savannah? Savannah is the tale of two cities.
Always.
And on the right, this is what you have: hundreds of tents and homeless people encamped, literally a football field away from this $40 million new hotel and condominiums. And
sure,
Chuck, you mentioned condominiums are 700,000 and up.
650 to 750,000 for those townhomes. Yeah.
All right, let's go back to the satellite map.
All right.
Thank you. So, what the sort of fresh hell is this, that we have this sort of investment going on here, and yet we have this sort of desperation and poverty bracketing the gilded investments right along the river.
There's only one way to get them moved out, right? Got to develop it.
Well,
make it nice enough that the police need to protect it. At least you'd think.
Well, right here, I got the mayor's 97-page
task force report, baby.
Task force report. And I'm sure Eddie's council and Edna's council, they all studied the problem. Van just studied it more deeply, but nobody does anything. Okay. Now, let me walk you back historically here, Chuck. And going back in time, the thing that people need to understand is that this Eastern Wharf, Savannah River Landing property from the river down to this black strip here and up President Streets was part of a tax allocation district. That's a special designation that is awarded by the city, the county, and the school board. And ironically, we voted on it. We didn't realize we were voting on what it was, but that's the way they word referendums for.
So what John is saying here is that all of the taxes that are generated in this area are required to stay in this area. And I will tell you specifically where that money is going. It's going to pay down bond debt that the city put up, and it's going to further place amenities to make that development more lucrative for investment.
Exactly. The money that you and I pay in our property taxes that goes to public safety, fire, cultural affairs, libraries, district attorney's office, court system, the normal stuff. This whole Richie Rich sector, they ain't paying into it except the original land value before development. Everything like that, the new tax base generator from that $40 million hotel for 20 years is not going to pay for the things that those affluent people.
I want a tax allocation district on the 100 block of Perry.
Yeah, well, I want one on Barnard from Hall to Huntington.
That's right. Everybody should have their own tax allocation.
Exactly. So this was a libertarian, capitalistic, gift to developers and speculators, while we're surrounded by homeless people. So this is the quintessential walking tour of what's up with Savannah. This is the tale of two cities. Now, the last thing I want to point out is the 4X at the top. And you'll see in the green type, it says Savannah Riverwalk.
That's right.
And it's a half-mile long Riverwalk extension connecting with the Marriott Riverfront.
That's correct.
This was done in the mid-2000s.
2008, 2009.
Right. By the benevolence of Senator Eric Johnson, who was the majority leader in the legislature. And he went to the city of Savannah and said, hey, how would you like the state to build you an $6 or $8 million Riverwalk extension along what was then going to be Savannah River Landing? And I'm sure Otis and Edna, that council, said, oh, we'd love it. What do you want? And he said, what I want you to do is I want you to use your influence on the Westside Urban Health Clinic executive board and get them to agree to move and sell their property, which is an entire city block between Whitaker and Abercorn, or Drayton and Abercorn on York Street. Right. And it's sold for 20 cents on the dollar, Chuck. It sold for $2.1 million. And that same year, Drayton Towers sold for $9 million. So this is a microcosm ecosphere of what's wrong with Savannah Chatham. And you can see it right there with the $40 million, it's not Hamilton Hotel, what's it called?
Thompson.
Forgive me, I'll get that sooner or later.
I gotcha.
And all the other affluent in development things that are infill that's going to happen here. And nobody's got a plan for the hundreds of homeless people in their tents and lean-tos, depending on United Way and all the charitable agencies here. So,
well, as was discussed at council, we don't have enough income-based housing, and everybody wants to talk about affordable housing. And you've got the Board of Housing Authority of Savannah, which is appointed by the mayor, supposed to be by the mayor and council, but seems to be just by the mayor. They're selling off assets. They're trying to get rid of assets.
Yeah, but Chuck, I think you'll agree. What we do is we talk a lot about our problems, but we don't ever solve our problems. What we don't talk a lot about, but we spend a lot of energy and deliver on, are the tax allocation districts, the Riverwalk extensions, the tax breaks for investors, bond issues. So people need to understand you shouldn't measure the effectiveness of excuse me, your councilman, mayor, by what they say. It's not reliable. You have to measure it on what they produce, what tangible things are happening by virtue of their leadership.
Yeah, like the West Chatham Business Park was a tax allocation district, you know? I mean, like, that was based on high quality paying jobs that are in the service or tourism industry. And it was further enough away from other development that it wasn't going to really impact anything. Our leaders in the last 25 years failed us. And what we're trying to do is prevent the next 25 years of leadership from kind of doing the same thing. And, you know, for those of you who are newer to our page, if you go and, you review, we've had over the course of 2 years now, this is our 76th episode. You'll see these themes. We are not really coming at this from a super leftist perspective or a super conservative perspective either. We're identifying these local policy issues and connecting them to the things that these leaders choose to do anyway, right? So we really need to continue to put the pressure up on our local leaders, especially at City Hall, to not be pro-gentrifying development and look out for the least of these. Because I want to ask you a question, John. You mentioned how this started like 04, 05, right? What was Savannah, Chatham County's population then? What is it now? Because this is what I keep telling people. If we keep growing our area without solving these problems, all you're asking for is the raw numbers of homeless and poor and the least of these expanding. Those that populations are just going to expand right along with the number.
To answer your question, I seem to remember it being about 127,000 people in that time.
And this was probably still a problem then. People were probably asking you guys about this issue then.
Well, there were just different things going on. But let me make a very, very important distinction. My little rant should not be interpreted as we can only do one or the other. That is, we can only favor the developer and we can't do anything for the homeless, or we have to do everything for the homeless and can't do anything for the developer. I'm not saying that.
But that's what the status quo is, though. The status quo is reality. One or the other. Yes.
That's reality. So our view, I think, is best described as communalistic, holistic, best practices. And you can go to other cities and you can see in real time that you can do both. You can reduce poverty. You can
walk and chew gum at the same time. Exactly.
So this is the problem that we have here. It's endemic. We are insular. This council, more than any other council, talks a great game. I got to hand it to them. But I'm not seeing the work product. It's either or, and they're going to say they're doing both. In reality, they're keeping the status quo business as usual intact.
Well, moving on for our viewers, you know that we really pick and choose our issues carefully based on policy. And John, you and I and Better Savannah as a group has been heavily critical of the city of Savannah and its police department and its inability to fully staff a department, right? That's a theme you and I really going back to like 2015. We're talking about that, right?
I've been talking about it. Yeah.
You've been talking about it for decades, but the first reason we have always criticized is because the numbers of population served that is calculated for the staffing levels is about 30 to 50,000 number too low to be calculating because of the amount of tourists, students, homeless, military personnel, who knows? There's a ton more people here to be served.
It's a 200,000 service district, Chuck.
Yes, but they base their staffing figures on 155,000. Okay,
right.
So one of the things is that you and I are in a bunch of these local neighborhood groups. I mean, the general perception and the raw data suggests that crime is on the rise. And I've been like thinking of this for a while, and I think this is kind of a new issue that we need to pivot to, and that's this backlog at the district attorney's office. Okay.
Okay.
This is an epidemic statewide, especially in the largest 5 counties, which, by the way, are all led by Democratic Party district attorneys, including our own Shalina Cook Jones. So right now in the Chatham County District Attorney's Office, between state court and superior court, you're talking about it's like 28,500 cases are backlogged. Okay.
Unbelievable.
Doing some math here, John. Let me just pull a frickin' calculator up, right? Let's say that 15% of these cases will get dropped, right? Lack of evidence, what have you. Probably 50% will get pleaded down to no time. Probably 10 to 15% might even be actually innocent. Who knows? But if there's 28,000 cases backlogged, all right, let me just do this number, 28,000. Let's just say there's 1.2% are individual criminals who should be facing real state time for crimes that they've committed, right?
Yep.
Not even necessarily hugely dangerous crimes, but repeat offenders, B&E, breaking and entering. You're talking about 300 to 350 criminals on the street. That is an excess number, while the Savannah Police Department is heavily understaffed. It's an impossible situation, no? How can we police our way out of crime rising when there's that many cases backlogged?
Well, for our viewers, the reason that case count is as high as it is because really of COVID, right? The justice system shut down for all intents and purposes. Even today, if you go over to the courthouse, they want you to still wear a mask, and they still ask you if you've been in contact, yada, yada, yada. So you can't take a chronically habitual, understaffed police department. And, this is nothing new, Chuck. We both know that going back to Michael Brown.
The first time.
They have purposely underfunded the police department because they don't want to staff up to the levels that the real population you would expect to see. So you've had this slow drag through the last decade and a half of a failure to acknowledge that you have to staff up. You got to have 3 police per 10,000 people, per 1,000 people.
Served, not residents, served.
Right. You can't do it on 1.9. So now you overlay a 2.5-year COVID crisis that just absolutely clogs up and shuts down, for all intents and purposes, criminal justice system. And to your point, you wind up with 28,000 cases, all cases in all courts backlogged. And man, that balloon's going to burst. If you think 7 shootings in the last 8 days is worrisome, wait till it's 25 shootings in the last 30 days or 40 shootings in the last 75 days. I mean, we just can't be comfortable, safe, and enriched with a public safety problem that's spiraling out of control. So,
this is a public policy problem that is not at the feet of Van Johnson, the mayor of Savannah, right? The city, the municipalities have no say-so in courts. That's a county function. But I'd even let Chester Ellis and them off the hook, too. This is a pandemic-produced problem. The state of Georgia needs to step in and fix the judicial system. John, the Republicans at the state level are very big on talking about we're the number 1 state to do business in. Number 1 state to do business in. Site Selection Magazine, 5 years running. Right? Rivian, 7,500 jobs coming. How can this
places to live and move to?
How can this be the number 1 state to do business in when if a crime happens to your family it's going to take 3.5, 4.5 years to give justice. More importantly, as a business owner, because of this case backlog, how is this the number one safe to do business in if a civil case is going to take 3.5 years?
Yep.
You know, if my rivals are going to corporate espionage because they know they can't get prosecuted in enough time, like, this is a dangerous problem for a multitude of issues.
It's wildly unhealthy. And your thoughts about the surplus the state has on reserve, and how allocating some of that across the state to the criminal justice system, to district attorneys and public defenders.
The state's sitting on $3 billion in cash, man.
Yeah, and hiring judges, expanding courtrooms. It just has to happen. And I hate to say that we're the first to kind of be ringing this bell, because when the data crossed our desk, we went, holy shit, this is a huge problem. What's being done? Nobody's talking about it yet.
Nothing. Well, what's being done is Chester Ellis and the district attorney Shalene Cook Jones are having a pissing match over $310,000 last summer in the budget process, as if $310,000 was going to solve the issue, right?
Yeah.
You know, another problem with the funding mechanisms for the judicial system is that there's not a lot of continuity presented. So they might give them $300,000 or $400,000 to hire an attorney this year, but there's no promise of that attorney being in next year's budget. You can't sell a public sector job for a professional industry like attorneys at law and expect somebody to go move and uproot and move here, start a career here, when there's no job security beyond 1 year.
Yeah. Chuck, why do you think, and this is a serious question, why do you think our local governments, Chatham County, City of Savannah, they seem to have a champagne and caviar budget for tourism development projects?
Yes.
But they've got a Pabst Blue Ribbon budget when it comes to public safety. How did we get there? What caused that?
I don't know. The book, Forrest Gump, 9/11 forcing more domestic travel than international travel. I mean, there's a lot of factors that led to the tourism boom.
I
think the question you're asking, though, is basically, we were faced with these issues 25 years ago as the tourism industry boomed, and they were not decided to be addressed. And those issues have grown and metastasized into a larger and larger problem. And then when you add a once in 100-year crisis like COVID, well, now, it's just another thing to sweep under the rug.
Yeah.
Even though I disagree with a lot of his viewpoints, Kevin Grogan always made a fascinating point when he said, Savannah's just not going to change until more, white women get murdered. I mean, the people who are affected by the crime are not the same people complaining about it. Right.
Yeah.
So just like Port Wentworth, just like Tybee Island and voter registration lists and the like, I think we're going to dive into this issue some more.
Yeah. Well, let me conclude by saying the style of philosophy in terms of budget allocations and approach is very much a Herbert Hoover mindset, and that is, laissez-faire. The business of government ought to be to stay out of business.
It's always in this town, John. It's always Hoover and FDR or Booker Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. It's which side of these debates are you on?
Listen, I'm on the FDR side, who pumped tons of money into the system. Hoover said the government needs to stay out of the way of business, and business will save us. Well, we saw what that happened.
Saw it again under Reagan.
LBJ said, hey, we are going to make investments where it matters. So did Kennedy. And unfortunately, our city government and county government tends to have a Coolidge Hoover mindset, even though it's 2022. They've got to be more communal. Remember, we're not saying you can only have one. You can do both. but they're reluctant to be fair about it. They want to slant it all to the business.
Well, look, if the choice is that we can't do both, I'd rather work on the least of these and leave the investment to the tourism industry, to the private sector. You know, that's just kind of how I feel about it. So we're pushing some time. I want to get this last main story out of the way. I played this at the top of the show, and I know a lot of people logged on to kind of talk and watch about this issue. But recently, John, we had an alderwoman, Linda Walter Bryan from the 3rd District. Yes. This is a big story. It's being talked about all over town. You know, obviously we have a more policy-focused take, I think. I could make fun of the situation.
We have a shortage of manpower.
We have a shortage of police. We just got done talking about this issue, right? We have a shortage of police officers, okay? And we have a sitting council person. You know, we don't have verifiable knowledge of how the call for service was originated, John. But I would imagine if we...
No, she says, I called you all when they show up.
Well, I don't know if she called the non-emergency number or called the precinct directly, but certainly there's a higher access level granted to somebody who's on council for police. But I just want to play this video again. This is about 1.5 minutes long. This is Alderwoman Linda Walter Bryan interacting with Savannah Police Department. By all evidence, seems like a completely civil matter. There's nothing criminal going on here, right?
As 2 patrol officers and a supervising sergeant.
2 patrol officers and a sergeant. So remember, we're budgeted for 535 officers. We have about 450 to 460. You take out the specialized units and the leadership, you're talking about maybe there's 350 officers on the street in Savannah right now. And you're talking about 1% almost of that number was used for this call for service. I just think it's fascinating. Let's watch and pick it up behind.
For a retail refund.
A retail refund. That's right.
Yeah.
I'm about to raise some hell up in here. Money. And so, yeah, I'm going to call the police. I'm going to call everybody. And y'all can call it what y'all want to call it. Only reason why I call it, it's not petty, because people complain about the store all the time.
Yes, ma'am.
They give people tainted stuff, but if they could do me like that, they do everybody like that. I'm going nowhere. I want my money. I'm about to have a community project on this corner right here. I'm about to call all my friends and do some lifestyle stuff, because that's what they do. I just need my receipts back.
Okay. Hold on, let me go find out. Hopefully they ain't work.
And tell them I want my food that I paid for back too. I'm up here raising hell about my money. This raggedy small stuff that they give people all the time and won't give a refund with receipts.
Just put it on the floor in there.
Y'all stick around here till she leave.
Unbelievable.
Stick around here until she leaves.
Yeah.
That's right, Keyshawn. Ain't no way. Ain't no effing way, buddy. Are you kidding me? Like, so.
Yeah. It's her district. It's her district. Did you see? We should probably play it again. Take a look at the volume of litter and trash and old 3 or 4 old tires discarded.
We'll play it again in just a second, because I got to play the whole clip when we play it the way I uploaded it. So not only that, I want you to, when we replay it in just a second, not just the juxtaposition of the amount of trash in that area for district, but I want you to see the kind of front clipped part of the vehicle that she's driving. I think it's a great ironic juxtaposition, because you've got what looks like a nice new Range Rover, right, being driven by the alderman, who is complaining about $50-something in seafood, and using police to settle a civil matter. You know, you're more than welcome. Anybody can go to small claims court and file anything.
You can go in on your own and just express yourself in a timely fashion and probably accomplish. You don't have to send in.
But even assuming she tried that and that didn't work, right? You know, like it's a civil matter. You know, it has zero to do with the laws of Georgia.
Look at Chuck.
No law had been broken.
The business owner said, "You bought this yesterday. If you
let's talk about all right, John. Let's just start from the beginning, okay? Break down, because you had it really well broken down to me yesterday when we talked about this, because the details in this story make it even worse.
Yeah, well, listen, there's a whole bunch of body footage, and by the way, the resolution on those body cameras is freaking amazing.
Getting pretty good, isn't it? The technology.
Yeah.
I agree. This is a great comment. She needs to be reprimanded. Where is the ethics board of Savannah?
Well,
on something like this, I hope that the restaurant owner will file a complaint. You know, I'm sure that there's some intimidation factor into doing that. You know,
listen, it's just not fair to say that Keisha's unhinged, and then you see this, which is totally unhinged.
This is everything they want Keisha to be, right? You know, to me, right? You know, because Keisha, while she does maybe have passion and sometimes too much of it, she's arguing about issues affecting people, real policy issues.
Yeah, and
this is somebody coming unhinged about a personal civil matter.
3 officers' time in about a 30-minute encounter. What for $59 worth of seafood? Well, that's
the police probably spent $6,000 on that interaction. You know, in terms of pay, upkeep on the vehicles, all the costs that it costs to run this police department. What a waste! Well, and again, how can this not be one of the biggest stories around town when the media, like Adam Van Brimmer and WTOC, you know, always make such a big deal about a divided council reprimanding one of their own? You know,
I want to put it out.
This is straight Tony Thomas. This is just like Tony Thomas a couple years ago, when that reporter came to Tony Thomas's property to try to get an interview, and he called her an effing cunt on camera, right? And Mayor Van Johnson, I think he abstained on that vote. I think he didn't even vote yes.
Well,
friends in low places, I tell you.
I just want to make a public service announcement that the next time Linda has a beef with a retailer under $100 or $150, she can certainly put it on her expense account or even call me, and we'll save the city. Don't be acting like
this mindset. I'm about to play the video again, but this mindset of, if they can do it to me, they can do it to any of my constituents.
Yeah.
Your role as a politician and policymaker has nothing to do with what you're talking about. If you want to be a crusader for consumers, go get your law license and start suing these companies.
Yeah. What she said was, you know, if they can do me this way, just imagine how they do all the other people.
All right, we're gonna watch this one more time, and then we'll wrap the show up.
I'm about to raise some hell up in here. Money. And so, yeah, I'm going to call the police. I'm going to call everybody. And y'all can call it what y'all want to call it. The only reason why I call it, it's not petty, because people complain about the store all the time.
Yes, ma'am.
They give people tainted stuff, but if they could do me like that, they do everybody like that. I'm going nowhere. I want my money. I'm about to have a community project on this corner right here. I'm about to call all my friends and do some lifestyle stuff, because that's what they do. I just want my receipts back.
Okay. I don't know. Let me go find out. Hopefully they ain't work.
And tell them I want my food that I paid for back too. I'm up here raising hell about my money. This raggedy song stuff that they give people all the time and won't give a refund with receipts.
Put it on the floor in there.
Y'all stick around here till she leave.
All right, so not only, John, the juxtaposition of the trash neighborhood with the super nice car and her district, and I want my food back so I can go throw it in on the floor. I love this line. I love this line at the beginning of the video. People are saying, everybody's saying this restaurant. That's so Trumpian. Don't you remember that was Trump's line? People are saying. People are saying, as you know, everybody knows this. You know, like this gross assumption that Linda's Seafood on Wheaton Street is a scourge to East Side Savannah. What data is there to justify that position?
There isn't. Listen to me. Google Linda's Seafood. It's
Let's
got a
find
4.7 star rating out of 5. And the comments are phenomenal. Best place in town. Loved it. Been going there for years. Check out the ratings.
I'm looking at it now. Give me a second to put it up on the screen. That's a great idea, by the way. I'm so glad you said that. Yelp, 4.5 out of 5 stars, right?
Yeah.
You know, got the Low Country Bowl and Spicy Conch. Coolest Canadian fish after walking off. These are all positive reviews. How long has that business been there? Do you know how hard it is to run a restaurant? You know, audience, 95% of restaurants fail within the first 2 years. 95%. This place has been there over a decade. You think that's by mistake?
Well, the last part of this, Chuck, is Linda bought the food. The next
Please tell
day,
the audience. This is a day later, guys. Yeah. She bought the food the day before.
Yeah.
24 hours later, wants to come back and get a refund.
And the owner said, "Listen, if you'd come back the day you bought it, I'd work with you. I'd give you your money back. But how do I know that you didn't leave it out overnight for 15 hours, and now you're coming in and telling me it's no good?" So I'm sorry. You're a day late and $1 short, Linda. Number 2, you don't get to tell the sergeant to go over there and get my receipts and my food. It's like, you know, it's because she's an Alderwoman. Look, let's face it. I don't think they'd do that on command for me. I just
I would like to call. Maybe that's an experiment. You know, maybe we should start running this social experiment and see if maybe we aren't understaffed. Maybe we're wrong, John. You know, that's exactly what it is, Archie. It's an abuse of power. It's power gone to the head. You know, it is disappointing. It's disappointing. You know.
Well, when you're the warrior of the people and you depend on the police department to get your receipts and pick up your food, that's beyond the pale.
That's exactly the equivalent. I'm gonna call the police about the McDonald's ice cream not working. You know, I mean that's literally what this is in relation to.
Yeah. And if anyone out in the community understands the short-staffed nature of the police department, it ought to be Linda or anyone else on council.
Absolutely. Absolutely it is.
Just don't do that. Okay, well.
Oh, I wanted to try and play kind of like, it's just, stop it. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing our city. The fact that this has been a story now that's gotten worse and worse and worse the last few days, it's just sad. You know, there are so much bigger issues, like the very democracy itself out in Port Wentworth, whether it's going to survive. That's a real issue. That's something to get passionate about. That's something to threaten legal action about, you know?
So listen,
it's a real issue.
What we've really done is a beautiful trifecta show. We've talked about the absolute destruction of the democratic process and ways in Port Wentworth, led by Ron Stevens and Gary Norton. We have looked at the Tale of Two Cities, where all the benefits and tax breaks and goodies go to the affluent and the oligarchs, while the homeless people get new tents at best. And then lastly, we've seen the power corrupts absolutely, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely.
With a total disregard for protocol and ethics. And I'm just gonna, get the policeman and sick them on this.
Yeah, and I saw after she was called out by community activist KJ, that they got into a large exchange, that was very rude and unprofessional on behalf of the Alderwoman as well. Again, this is what somebody who is unhinged looks like. Somebody who is fighting for the least of these in a more passionate way than you would like. That's not unhinged. That's passionate. It's passionate leadership. It's probably what we need more of. And stop trying to, put this type of label onto something that's not there. Be fair. Where's the editorials on this? I hope somebody will file an ethics charge. That's all I'm gonna say.
Why isn't she calling sanitation about that lot that they walked through that is filled with litter and 4 or 5 bald tires just tossed out on the side of the road, and then a city trash can, which I don't think made it into these cuts, that's just overflowing. I mean, here she is in that context, in that environment, wanting the police to step and fetch over and get her food and her receipts. When she said if they didn't do it, she was going to hold a rally, a pop-up rally with all her friends on the corner. I don't think there's that many Land Cruisers in town, Chuck.
I mean, certainly those people would not be Savannians.
Well,
they would be Chatham Countyans, but that's a discussion for another day. Next week's St. Patrick's Day. I don't think we'll have a show for Thursday, but right after, guys, it's going to be a whirlwind of candidates. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, it's qualifying week in Georgia. Senator Jackson did qualify for the labor commissioner's race, so he will for sure be vacating that Senate seat. Derek Malo and Orlando Scott have qualified, and you've got Lady Mahogany and Ann Allen Westbrook qualifying for House District 163. I've already seen locally the school board candidates have qualified. Peter, Ty Whiteley, Todd Rhodes, and Roger Moss will be the 4 candidates there unless something pops up. Any other potpourri notes?
You're going to get them all scheduled.
I'm going to do my best, man. I'm going to do my best. Any other potpourri before we leave?
No. Thanks for producing, and
you're welcome.
We're going to have a next busy 60 days. That's for sure.
Oh God, yeah. At least you're going to have a vacation afterwards.
That's
Again,
right.
Appreciate all you guys' support. If you joined us midway through the episode, feel free to go back, rewind, rewatch, and share this content so that more people can see it. Appreciate you guys.
But ATR, support ATR.
Well, yeah, actually, that's a great point. These other shows have been talking about this issue, especially with Linda the last week. ATR Network on Facebook and YouTube, the Rabble on Wednesdays, and the Watchdogs on Saturdays specifically, probably my 2 favorite shows on there. Keisha Gibson Carter on Monday has Candidly Keisha, and then on her own page, Elisa Miller Blakely has For Us By Us on Tuesdays. Always some good tidbits of information. Oh, can't leave without shouting out Dr. Small, Leonard Small. Unity in the Community Political Action page. That's a great Saturday afternoon nugget of political talk.
And Jim
Marikis, shooter. Jim Marikis, Rachel Flora, the Savannian. I know that they're tied up with Stopover Music Festival right now, but I assume that they'll be back to the grindstone right after. So we appreciate you guys joining in with us. We'll see you in about a week and a half, 2 weeks when we start rolling out a bunch of candidate interviews. It's going to be exciting. Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Yep.